November 19th, 1942. The Eastern Front is frozen in place. And yet on this day, the map of war will change forever. As the sun rises over the endless steppe, the ground itself begins to tremble. From the north and south, the Red Army strikes. Artillery thunder rolls across the horizon. In a matter of hours, the German Sixth Army, 364,000 men, is surrounded at Stalingrad. The trap has been sprung. No escape, no rescue, no retreat. The largest encirclement in human history has just begun. Cinematic pause, sound of typewriter keys clicking. At Luftflotte 4 headquarters, an urgent order arrives. It bears the seal of Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, Hitler's flamboyant air chief. The order is short, direct, and utterly impossible. Supply the trapped army by air. The man chosen to carry out this order is General Feldmarschall Wolfram Freiherr von Richthofen, a name synonymous with precision, intellect, and loyalty to the Reich. When he reads the order, he murmurs just 5 words to his aide. Impossible, even to imagine such a thing. And yet, Richthofen will try. Because in Nazi Germany, failure is not an option, even when success defies the laws of physics. To understand why Richthofen's words matter and why his defiance became a tragedy, you must first understand who he was. Born in 1895 to a Prussian noble family, Wolfram von Richthofen grew up in a world of discipline and precision. His cousin was the legendary Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, the ace of aces from the Great War. But Wolfram was different. Where Manfred had chased glory in the skies, Wolfram sought logic, equations, engines, and the mechanics of flight. He studied aeronautical engineering at the Technical University of Berlin, earning his doctorate in 1929. His dissertation was not about dogfights or heroics. It was about the mass production of all-metal aircraft. While others dreamed of victory, Richthofen dreamed of efficiency. By the 1930s, as Hitler secretly rebuilt German air power in defiance of Versailles, Richthofen became one of the architects of the new Luftwaffe. He wasn't a romantic aviator. He was a technocrat, a man who treated war like a system to be optimized. His motto was simple: war is mathematics performed in blood. In 1936, when the Spanish Civil War erupted, Richthofen was sent to command air units of the Condor Legion, a testing ground for Germany's future war machine. He studied how aircraft could coordinate with ground forces, refining tactics that would soon devastate Europe. It was Richthofen who first demonstrated blitzkrieg from the air, coordinated strikes that combined speed, precision, and terror. When the skies over Guernica burned in April 1937, it was his bombers that executed the attack, a grim experiment that foreshadowed Warsaw, Rotterdam, and London. To him, it wasn't cruelty. It was calculus. By 1939, as Hitler unleashed the invasion of Poland, Richthofen commanded the 8th Fliegerkorps. He revolutionized air-ground warfare, fast-moving columns supported by dive bombers that obliterated resistance before it could react. Poland fell in weeks. France followed. The Luftwaffe dominated every front it entered. Even among Nazi generals, Richthofen stood apart. He was neither sycophant nor zealot. He was efficient, dangerously efficient. His staff feared his temper but respected his results. He didn't just follow orders, he optimized them. By 1942, Richthofen was one of Hitler's most trusted field commanders, promoted, decorated, and celebrated. When the summer offensive, Operation Blue, began, he was tasked with providing air support for the drive toward the Caucasus oil fields. Stalingrad was never meant to be the main target. It was just another name on a map, a waypoint, a river crossing. But in war, some names become destiny. By late August, Stalingrad had become an inferno. On August 23rd, Richthofen unleashed the most concentrated aerial bombardment in the history of the Eastern Front. Over 2,000 sorties in a single day. The city burned for 3 days and nights. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed. Entire districts vanished into ash and dust. Yet, ironically, Richthofen's bombardment, intended to destroy, ended up fortifying the city. The ruins became perfect cover for Soviet defenders. The very destruction he created became their armor. By early November, Soviet troop concentrations were detected north and south of the city. Reconnaissance photos showed endless convoys of tanks, artillery, and men. Richthofen's intelligence officers warned of an impending counteroffensive. He knew the Red Army's playbook. He had seen it before. He wrote in his diary, "The Russians are coming from all directions. I cannot see how Paulus will hold." On November 19th, the storm broke. 2 Soviet army groups attacked simultaneously. The Romanian divisions protecting the German flanks disintegrated within hours. The trap closed on the 23rd. Over 364,000 German soldiers were trapped inside a frozen hellscape. Hitler's proud Sixth Army, once the spearhead of the Eastern Front, was now a surrounded, starving fortress. In Berlin, Hitler raged. Retreat was forbidden. He issued the order personally. Hold Stalingrad at all costs. Göring, desperate to prove the Luftwaffe's worth, made his fatal boast. "The Air Force will supply the army, I guarantee it." Richthofen froze. He had done the math in his head before Göring even finished speaking. The numbers didn't lie. They condemned the plan before it began. The Sixth Army needed at least 600 tons of supplies per day to survive, to fight. It needed closer to 5,800 tons. Food, ammunition, fuel, winter gear. A single Junkers Ju-52 transport could carry just 1.5 tons. Even if every available aircraft flew non-stop without losses in perfect weather, they could deliver less than 200 tons a day. It wasn't a matter of courage. It was a matter of physics. Richthofen went to Göring personally. He laid out the figures, line by line. He pleaded, a breakout must be attempted while fuel remains. But Göring refused to listen. Hitler had spoken. The Luftwaffe would make the impossible possible. Richthofen understood the meaning. The Sixth Army was already dead. Only the paperwork remained. November 24th, 1942. The airlift begins. Across the icy steppe, hundreds of aircraft roar to life. Crews load crates of rations, medicine, and ammunition in the dark. Pilots whisper to each other that they are flying into a grave. The first flights succeed. Supplies are dropped. For a brief moment, hope flickers. By December 7th, the airlift reaches its peak, 362 tons in one day. Then, winter tightens its grip. The thermometer drops below 30 degrees Celsius. Engines freeze. Fuel turns to gel. Soviet fighters hunt transports like wolves. For every plane that lands, another burns on the steppe. The numbers never add up. Day after day, the tonnage drops. 300, 200, 150, 94. Men begin dying faster than planes can land. By December 1942, the dream of the airlift was dying, just like the men trapped in Stalingrad. Every day, hundreds of planes took off from the snowbound airfields of Tatsinskaya, Morozovsk, and Novocherkassk. Every night, fewer came back. Each mission was a death sentence wrapped in frost and flame. Pilots flew through blizzards so thick they couldn't see their own wings. Engines froze solid midair, and when they landed inside the pocket, at makeshift airstrips carved from the ice, Soviet artillery shells rained down on them before they could unload. They called it the corridor of death. Every successful delivery came at the cost of another crew that never returned. And yet the orders never stopped coming. Richthofen recorded his frustration in his private diary. "The weather is our enemy. We have no transport planes left, no fuel, no hope. And still, the Führer demands miracles." In reality, the Luftwaffe was collapsing under the weight of its own promises. Of the 500 aircraft assigned to the Stalingrad airlift, barely half were operational at any given time. Entire wings were grounded by lack of spare parts. Mechanics worked in temperatures that turned metal brittle and fingers numb. Each flight that made it through was a victory measured not in tons, but in minutes of survival. The Sixth Army, once a mechanized juggernaut, was now starving in place. Men boiled horse meat in shell casings. Wounded soldiers froze to death on the operating tables. Ammunition was rationed to 5 rounds per rifle per day. Radio intercepts tell the story more clearly than any statistic. "We are fighting with bayonets against tanks. Send food, send fuel, or end this suffering." But no one was coming. Then, disaster struck. On December 23rd, Soviet tanks of the 24th Army broke through and surrounded the Tatsinskaya airfield, the main hub of the entire airlift. Richthofen's pilots fought from the cockpits of their grounded aircraft, machine-gunning Soviet infantry as they charged across the runways. It was chaos, a blizzard of smoke, blood, and wrecked aircraft. Over 70 transport planes were destroyed on the ground. Hundreds of trained aircrew were lost. Tatsinskaya was gone, and with it, the last chance of supplying the Sixth Army. Richthofen was incandescent with rage. He blamed the arrogance of impossible promises. He wrote, "They have killed the Luftwaffe with orders from behind desks. Not with bullets, but with stupidity." But in Nazi Germany, truth was not a defense. Richthofen had no choice but to continue obeying orders he knew were murderous. By January 1943, the situation was beyond redemption. The airlift was delivering less than 80 tons a day. Most of it, gasoline, not food. Fuel that could no longer be used because the tanks were frozen and the engines dead. The men at Stalingrad were eating snow. They wrote home about chewing leather belts, grinding flour from frozen horse feed, and fighting over dead rats. Colonel Wilhelm Adam later described the scene. The city was no longer a battlefield. It was a mass grave with smoke rising from the corpses. Hitler refused to listen. He issued radio orders to General Friedrich Paulus. "You will stand fast. You will not surrender. Stalingrad will be your monument." And so it was. Richthofen tried one last desperate innovation. He ordered pilots to fly night missions without lights, using only the glow of burning Stalingrad as navigation. He experimented with container drops, supplies thrown from low altitude to save time, but most were lost or shattered on impact. By January 20th, the airlift was reduced to a handful of aircraft landing in blinding snow. Each load of supplies, barely enough for a single regiment, was fought over by starving soldiers as soon as it hit the ground. Still, Richthofen flew to the front personally. He landed near Morozovsk to inspect the situation, and what he saw haunted him. Rows of frozen corpses, aircraft so battered they couldn't take off, young pilots crying from exhaustion. He said quietly to his adjutant, "This is no longer a war. This is murder by command." January 31st, 1943. After 72 days of siege and starvation,
The radio transmission everyone feared finally came from the ruins of Stalingrad. "This is the Sixth Army. We are finished." General Paulus, now promoted to Field Marshal by Hitler that very morning, a cynical gesture to ensure he wouldn't surrender, made his decision anyway. He refused to commit suicide for a lie. He surrendered to the Soviets with 90,000 survivors out of the original 364,000. Only 6,000 would ever see Germany again. When the message reached Luftwaffe headquarters, Richthofen reportedly stood in silence. Then he took off his cap, placed it on the map table, and said, "The Luftwaffe has failed, but not the men. The blame lies with those who believed arrogance could replace arithmetic." Richthofen would never recover from Stalingrad, physically or psychologically. He continued to serve, now commanding air operations in Italy and later in the Balkans, but the spark was gone. His diaries turned dark, filled with cynicism and disgust for the regime he once served so efficiently. In 1945, as the Reich collapsed, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He died that July in an American military hospital. The same man who once engineered victory, dying a prisoner of his own conscience. He was 49 years old. Richthofen's name faded from history, overshadowed by his cousin, the Red Baron. But within the archives of the Luftwaffe, he is remembered as the man who calculated the impossible and was forced to attempt it anyway. His story is not one of heroism or villainy, but of cold, mathematical tragedy. He proved a truth that dictators refuse to learn. You can order courage, but you cannot order miracles. At Stalingrad, physics triumphed over ideology, reality over rhetoric, and the laws of war over the fantasies of power. The frozen airfields of the Stalingrad pocket are silent now. No engines, no smoke, just the wind whispering over the bones of men who obeyed the impossible. Wolfram von Richthofen didn't lose the airlift because he lacked genius. He lost it because genius cannot defeat reality when truth itself becomes forbidden. If you found value in this story, if you believe history should be told not just as facts, but as human truth, then subscribe and stay with us, because each week we uncover the hidden chapters of World War II, where courage met catastrophe and one decision changed history forever. Subscribe now and join us for the next untold story. Before you go, keep the story alive. Watch one of these documentaries next and step deeper into the world that shaped our future.